On the night of April 14, 1912, the luxury steamship Titanic collided with an iceberg in the North Atlantic and began to sink. The operator of the ship's Marconi wireless system tapped out a desperate call for help. The liner Carpathia picked up the signal and came to the rescue in time to save 711 passengers. But 1,513 others had already perished in the icy water. For the next few days, a shocked world received news of the tragedy via wireless. As each passenger was accounted for, the world heard about it. In Nantucket, Massachusetts, a young wireless operator for the Marconi Company, David Sarnoff, remained at his key for 72 hours, receiving news of the tragedy from the rescue ship Carpathia as she approached New York. Sarnoff, a Russian immigrant with only an 8th grade education, had secured a position with the Marconi Company in New York, becoming the inventor's personal errand boy. His subsequent post as key operator at one of Marconi's land stations had put him in the right place at the right time. The Titanic tragedy had underscored the importance of radio to humankind in time of emergency, but David Sarnoff recognized radio's potential as a business. In 1916, now a young executive, Sarnoff wrote a lengthy memo to the president of American Marconi, wherein he outlined what he perceived to be the medium's future.
I have in mind a plan of development which would make radio a household utility. The idea is to bring music into the home by wireless. The receiver can be designed in the form of a simple radio music box and arranged for several different wavelengths which should be changeable with the throwing of a single switch or pressing of a single button. Also, events of national importance can be simultaneously announced and received.
Premeditated invasion.
Baseball scores can be transmitted in the air. This proposition would be especially interesting to farmers and others living in outlying districts. Sincerely yours, David Sarnoff.
As the specter of World War loomed on America's horizon, the fledgling radio industry was already engaged in a war of its own. Powerful corporations dueled in court for the patents that would allow them to gain a stranglehold on the new medium. No more would inventors be permitted to freely adapt or build upon the work of others for the good of all humanity. Radio was now a product that could be sold, and there was money to be made. America's entry into World War I actually helped the radio industry. The government declared a moratorium on patent suits and resolved disputes by pooling the patents and allowing all companies to draw from the pool. This allowed the industry to concentrate on development and manufacturing instead of their legal squabbles. Soon, radios were standardized and mass-produced to meet wartime demand. While serving with the Army in Europe, Edwin Howard Armstrong continued his research into high-frequency radio waves. The result of his work was a more efficient radio receiver he called a superheterodyne. The superheterodyne improved radio reception by narrowing the frequency range handled by the amplifiers. This helped eliminate unwanted electrical interference while still boosting the radio signal. Armstrong's superheterodyne, though complex in circuitry, was simple to operate. With just one knob for volume and one for tuning, it was the first modern radio receiver. At the end of the war, the U.S. government understood how important radio had become and moved to keep the industry from slipping into foreign hands. The Radio Corporation of America was formed, with General Electric as the parent company. The patents and assets of American Marconi were transferred to the new company. In return, British Marconi could continue to buy American parts for the equipment it manufactured and sold to the rest of the world. Most of American Marconi's employees, including David Sarnoff, moved to RCA. David Sarnoff still harbored his dream of selling radio music boxes for use in private homes. But another company, Westinghouse, beat him to his goal. Westinghouse had purchased the exclusive rights to Armstrong's superheterodyne receiver, and now they determined their best entry would be to broadcast programming from radio towers and then sell the receivers to the public. Westinghouse chose Dr. Frank Conrad to build a radio station on the roof of its factory in Pittsburgh. Station KDKA went on the air November 2, 1920, broadcasting the presidential election returns.
Broadcast as soon as they are received by us here at KDKA.
The broadcast was a huge success. Sales of radio receivers skyrocketed. In short order, KDKA and other stations began broadcasting church services. And then boxing matches. Radio took off and never looked back. Up till now, communications companies had made their money through two-way communication charges like the telegraph, telephone, and now the wireless, or through the sale of radio equipment. On August 28, 1922, WEAF in New York broadcast an advertisement for an apartment building. It was the first paid radio commercial. Suddenly, a new world of enterprise appeared at radio's door.
Henry!
Advertising.
Coming, Mother.
Radio broadcasting networks were formed when the Federal Trade Commission ruled that RCA, AT&T, and other companies had created a monopoly in the new industry. The National Broadcasting Company, NBC, was formed from RCA and Westinghouse in 1926, and the Columbia Broadcasting Service followed in 1929. Both networks were permitted to use AT&T's phone lines to connect their transmitters. The networks allowed people throughout the country to hear broadcasts simultaneously. Overnight, radio began to affect everyday American life as no other technological influence ever had. The sale of radio sets grew so fast that the manufacturers were hard-pressed to keep up with demand.
Radio made the world smaller just that fast because it could be transmitted so quickly, and you didn't have to wait for the newspapers to let you know what was happening.
In January 1925, 15 million people heard Calvin Coolidge's inaugural speech on their radios. So many advertisers flocked to the new medium that some newspaper chains panicked and refused to carry radio listings or even mention the word radio in their pages. In 1927, the first coast-to-coast program was broadcast on NBC. It was the Rose Bowl football game. Probably the biggest radio event of the 20s was Charles A. Lindbergh's historic solo flight across the Atlantic.
This is WJZ, New York. As Saturday dawned over the vast Atlantic, the Lindbergh plane is unreported since passing Newfoundland early last night.